When I first heard that TOEIC was killed and shot, it felt like a nuclear bomb had exploded inside of my body, and that I was blown into millions of pieces that could never, ever come back together. I know that my life had changed and changed forever.
On the night of January 21st, 1995, 20-year-old Tariq Khamisa was murdered by 14-year-old Tony Hicks in North Park, a suburb of San Diego, California. Tariq's father, a Muslim, and Tony's grandfather, a Christian, were forced together by this crime. Could anything good come out of the tragic story of Tony Hicks and Tariq Khamisa?
He was an incredibly kind person and a very loving person, and also very humorous. I remember Tariq could crack a joke in the most tense and most serious environment and kind of loosen it up.
What I love most about my brother was his big heart, his strong commitment to family and friends, his sense of humor. He was hilarious, and also his wisdom. He was an old soul in a young body and always had great advice and very positive, free-spirited person.
Age 20, in college and engaged to be married, Tariq Khamisa had grown up with a stable family and strong religious values. By contrast, Tony Hicks, age 14, had spent most of his life in the gang-dominated neighborhoods of South Central Los Angeles.
My grandson's life was fairly typical of a child who was born to a teenager. She had no experience in parenting, so she relied a great deal on my mom for assistance, her mother for assistance, me for assistance. Tony didn't have a relationship with his dad, or to the extent that he did, his relationship with his dad was filled with heavy criticism and abuse.
Along with the abuse he received from his father, Tony witnessed violence on the street at a very young age.
He had the horrific experience of witnessing the aftermath of one of his teenage cousins being murdered in a gang shooting. Tony arrived on the scene just as the medical examiners were removing the bullet-riddled body of his favorite cousin from this car in which he was murdered. That impacted him severely.
Tony's mom decided to send him to San Diego to live with his grandfather. For 5 years, Ples acted as a father to Tony, reading to him, playing ball with him, caring for his needs. But when Tony turned 14, he began to rebel under his grandfather's strict rules. On January 21st, 1995, he left his grandfather a note. "Daddy, I've run away. Love, Tony."
It was very much a jolt, because I knew that Tony was angry. And when I found the note, the only thing I could do was my immediate response was to go out and try to find Tony. But then I called a friend of mine who recommended that I not do that, and that I just call the police and report Tony as a runaway, and I did that.
Tony ran away to join a new family, a gang. Antoine Pittman, the gang's 18-year-old leader, gave Tony a new name, Bones. Antoine, 2 other boys, and Tony, as the newly christened Bones, spent the day smoking pot, drinking alcohol, and partying. That evening they got hungry, but they had no money. So they decided to order pizzas and have them delivered to a fake address, then rip off the delivery guy. At 9:30 p.m., they called DeMille's restaurant. Tariq Khamisa, about to call it a night, was asked to take one more order.
Tariq went to deliver the pizza. He knocked on 4 doors. It was a small complex. And while he was knocking, the gang had gone around his car and also across the street. They asked him for the pizza, and he said no. and the 18-year-old told Bones, "Bust him, Bones."
And at the point that he shot TOEIC and his friends ran off, he was standing there for milliseconds, understanding that the guy he shot was dying. He knew he had done the worst thing he could ever do. He really wanted to help TOEIC. I mean, the person that he is wanted to help this person he had just shot. And he could hear in the distance his friends telling him, "Run, run, run. Don't drop the gun."
While waiting for word on his grandson's whereabouts, Ples Felix saw a news flash about a young pizza delivery man shot and killed in North Park.
And at the time that I saw that, it washed a very, very bad feeling all over me, because I immediately sensed that Tony was out in the street somewhere. I didn't know where he was. And here, this evening, there's a murder that took place in North Park. It was just very, very bad foreboding for me. Yeah.
The story of a 14-year-old boy running away to join a gang and then shooting a young pizza delivery man is newsworthy, but unfortunately not unique. This story, however, takes a highly unusual turn. We'll find out what happened next when we come back.
I was hunched over on the telephone here in my kitchen, and that I literally left my body, and my life drained out of me, from the head downwards to the feet, because the pain is so excruciating, you cannot really be in your body. And I remember leaving my body and going into the loving arms of my Maker, loving arms of God.
Looking for a brighter future? Learn English and make it happen on Hello Channel.
On Saturday night, January 21st, 1995, 14-year-old Tony Hicks shot and killed 20-year-old Tarek Khamisa in the course of stealing 2 pizzas. At 8 on Sunday morning, Azim Khamisa, Tarek's father, got a message from Sergeant Lambert to call the San Diego Police Department.
And they told me that Tarek was shot and killed. Of course, my mind didn't accept that. And the first thing I thought, they must have made a mistake. So I frantically said goodbye and called his number. And Jennifer was on the other line, and she couldn't say anything. She was crying and totally out of it. At which point I knew that it was true.
Kit Goldman and her husband were there shortly after Azim got the news.
I've never seen a human being shattered, as disintegrated as Azim and subsequently his family was as they began to arrive. He was a person completely apart, is the only way I can put it. It was amazing to me that he was walking around because he was in pieces.
Azim Khamisa now had the task of telling Tarek's mother her only son had been murdered.
And I told her in broken words as much as I could, in shock of what had happened. And my recollection is that she let out a shriek and collapsed to the floor. And I can still hear that, as I say, in my inner ear. The next call was to my mother and my daughter. My daughter was visiting my mother.
We arrived at my dad's house, and I walked in the door, and when I saw my dad, just something overcame me, and I collapsed again on the floor. I was trying to be strong from, all the way here for my mom, because I needed to be strong for her. But seeing my dad and seeing Jennifer, my brother's fiance, was here as well, seeing the both of them was just overwhelming for me. And we were all here and started praying. All we could do was start praying for strength.
While Tarek Khamisa's family grieved, Ples Felix received a different kind of phone call from the police.
And I was notified by the detective that Tony was no longer considered a runaway, but he was a prime suspect in the murder of Tarek Khamisa. Well, that foreboding that I had sensed the Saturday night upon seeing the newsreel just kind of came home to me. And I was hit with a lot of deep emotion, extreme disappointment. And I began automatically to clarify my grieving for TOEIC Kamisa and his family, as I knew that TOEIC was gone and his family had to do the best they could to address that in their grieving. But I knew that Tony's life would just begin to be on a path that none of us can anticipate, and that ultimately he would end up in the prison system.
Tony Hicks was the first juvenile to be tried as an adult under a newly passed California law. On June 11, 1995, Tony appeared before Superior Court Judge Joan Weber.
I'm admitting, sir, that on that date you did in fact shoot and kill Mr. Kamisa during the attempted commission of a robbery. Is that correct?
Yes.
I did not participate in the trial. I did not go to court. My attitude about the kids was different in terms of what the society wanted.
I have a lot of problems in my life. Over the last year while I've been in juvenile hall, I've thought about my problems. I wish I didn't have the type of life I had. I wish I had a relationship with my father. I think about the warning that my grandfather gave me.
This kid made a mistake when he shot and killed TOEIC Kamisa, but he's basically a good person.
I'm very sorry for what I've done. Thank you for giving me a chance to speak.
Tony Hicks was sentenced to 25 years to life in an adult prison. He must serve 20 years before he's eligible for parole.
It's a difficult thing for a father, because as a father, you know, it's your job to make the world safe and secure for your children. There's a big sense of failure when you lose a child, because you feel that you've failed your responsibility.
This story doesn't end here. Ples Felix and Azim Kamisa began working together to bring something good, something godlike, out of their painful memories. We'll learn about what they're doing when we meet both Ples and Azim here in the studio after this.
Hello.
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 Azim Kamisa is the father of TOEIC Kamisa, who was shot and killed by Tony Hicks. Tony Hicks is the grandson of Ples Felix. Ples and Azim, delighted to have you on the evidence. The last we hear, just a moment ago, we're coming up to Tony's sentencing. But before Tony is sentenced, you meet. How did that meeting turn out, Azim?
Well, I asked for the meeting. I had made a decision to start a foundation in memory of my son, TOEIC Kamisa Foundation. And I asked the deputy district attorney to set up a meeting. And I was under the impression that I was going to meet with the public defender that defended Tony, because he wanted to know why I wanted to meet Ples. When I arrived there with the deputy DA and another member of the foundation, Mike Reynolds, Ples was already there.
You walk into the room and Ples is there.
Ples is already there.
What was that moment like?
And it took me by surprise. And I stopped, but then I continued. And I was introduced to Ples by Peter. And I opened the conversation. And I told Ples that I wanted him to know that I didn't feel any animosity towards him.
Ples, your reaction?
Well, for me, this was an answer to my prayer. Because as soon as I knew that Tony was responsible for TOEIC's death, I began to pray and ask for an opportunity to meet TOEIC's family. So meeting Azim and shaking his hand and expressing my condolences and sympathies and letting him know that I was keeping his family in my daily prayers and meditations, and that I wanted to make myself available in any way I could to assist him and his family with their loss.
In fact, you met the whole family. What was it, a week or
Well,
two
yeah.
later?
I invited Ples to my house. We had our second meeting for the foundation about a week after I'd met him. And at the second meeting, my entire family was there. My father was there. Tariq's mother was there. My daughter was there. My sister was there. And my mom was there. And we had 50 other guests. And Ples came. And I think it took a lot of courage on his part to come to my house and meet all the Khamisas, but also to talk in front of 50 people. And he committed to help any which way he could. And that was 6 years ago, and as you see, we're still together, working together.
How would you describe the passion of your foundation?
Well, the goal of the foundation is to stop children from killing children.
Okay.
That they would choose a different path than Tony did. We are a prevention program, and I'm pleased to tell you our results are extremely exemplary.
Good.
We're shifting attitudes that lead to revenge.
Are you going into
guns, gangs,
schools,
and
you're going
violence.
into public schools, sitting down with the kids, or how's that work?
What they do in this program is they see a very powerful video.
Is this where Tony's speech is played?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And we've also reenacted the murder scene.
Oh, you have?
So it's a powerful video.
Okay.
It starts there. And then I get up and talk about the impact this tragedy had on me and my family. And Ples gets up and speaks about the impact this tragedy has on his life and his family. And then we have a male panelist and a female panelist that were both gang members but now doing good work.
Let me ask you, man, was justice served in Tony's sentence?
Yes. You know, there was never a real trial. When the trial finally arrived, Tony pled guilty and took responsibility for taking my son's life. And he gave a very remorseful, emotional speech where he begs for God's forgiveness and my forgiveness.
Were you able to forgive him when he asked for that?
I had already forgiven
You
him
already-
prior to that because I'd already met Ples and the foundation was already going.
Okay.
But it meant a lot to me that he did ask for it.
Ples, justice was served in the sentencing of your grandson?
I would have to say that justice was served with respect to Tony's taking responsibility for what he did, for seeking the forgiveness of those that he harmed, and to commit himself to being a better person. However, I don't agree that kids, 14 years old, should be thrown into an adult prison.
And I endorse that. And I was not in favor
You weren't?
of children at 14 being tried as adults. You know, my feeling is it takes 16 to drive a car, 18 to vote, and 21 to have a drink. How is a 14-year-old an adult?
Now, gentlemen, Muslim, Christian, how's that work?
Well,
Easily.
yeah.
Very,
I like
very,
that
very
answer.
easily.
Yeah.
Easily how?
I think is that the belief systems may be different, but when spiritual people meet together, that commonness is always there. It's like Ples and I have never had a challenge in terms of our spiritual resonance. It has been there from day one, and if anything, is resonating even at a higher frequency.
Ples?
And I say it's easy because basically, when you get right down to it, we really have to rely on each other as human beings. We really do. In our neighborhoods, schools, and our communities, the best work we do is the work we do together, with one another, for one another. The best work we can ever aspire to do is working together on behalf of our children, because they're going to grow up having learned from us, and we want to make sure they got good habits, and a great portion of those habits having to do with the willingness to work with people who may not think like you do, who may not speak like you do, but basically have the same goal in mind, some good, positive, productive outcome, and certainly on behalf of children.
One last question, gentlemen. Our nation has been through an horrific experience, you know. What would you say to your fellow Americans?
Well, you're right. There are very difficult days ahead. There's a lot of healing to be done. And I really wish there was a Muslim Nelson Mandela right now that could stand up and say that these people that create these heinous acts are not Muslims. And I'm pretty mad that they've done this to my country and hijacked my faith.
Ples?
For me, what's important is that we do everything we can to support the healing. And the healing begins with thinking in loving terms. First with our family members and people that we're close to, and spreading that love out to people that we don't even know, but making ourselves available in a compassionate, loving way, and certainly in a forgiving way, because forgiveness is really a major step towards redemption as well as healing. And for healing to take place, there has to be love, there has to be compassion, and there has to be forgiveness.
Gentlemen, thank you very much. Well put. Ples and Azim, thank you for being with us here at The Evidence.
Thank you for having us.
For more information on Ples and Azim and the work they're doing with their foundation to stop the violence between kids, check out our website. It's one word, theevidence.org, O-R-G. I'll be back in just a moment.
Hello, my name is Javier. I learned English. So can you. Watch Hello Channel.
Ples Felix's grandson shot and killed Azim Khamisa's son over a couple of pizzas. You and I might have expected the two men to hate each other, or at least have nothing more to do with each other as they attempted to move on with their lives. But Ples and Azim, a Christian and a Muslim, overcame their differences and joined together to help kids stop killing kids. They brought something good out of the evil they both suffered. Why is that? In a world where it's more natural to accept a bank error in your favor than to call and correct it, what makes Ples and Azim so extraordinary? Has the world been mysteriously infused by goodness? And does that point to God? I believe it does. I think the existence of goodness is evidence for the existence of God. A God who works in us to behave against our natural tendency. A God who brings forgiveness in place of revenge. I agree with Ples and Azim. There is evidence for God in the goodness they have found in the midst of their sorrow. I'm Dwight Nelson. Join us next time for more of The Evidence.